What's up, guys? This is Nathan down here at ZIMM'S Guitars. Today we're going to take a look at this 1962 brown face Fender concert. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to replace these electrolytic caps here on the board. There's two 25 microfarad, two 25 microfarad, and one 2 microfarad cap in there. So I'm going to be replacing those with some Sprague Atom caps. And I'm gonna actually remove these covers here and leave them on. You can see this bias cap down here, this 25 microfarad at 50 volts. This one has actually been replaced, but they left the sleeve on it. Same with all the filter caps that are underneath in the doghouse. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with these ones right here, and I'm gonna lift these up and see if we can get that cover off. And I believe that that one is actually the lead to the ground. So we are just going to snip that one out right there. Okay. So now let's see if we could push this out right here. You might need a sort of a box cutter or something to get under that edge. Okay, so you can see that we were able to get that lip up. We might need to bring it out just a little bit further in order to get this cap out of here. There you go. Perfect. Just like that, you have your sleeve and your capacitor. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to get my two capacitors ready that are going to go on here. So these are two 25 microfarad at 50 volts. And what I like to do is I like to twist them together. Just like that. And then we can go ahead and snip off one of our leads there. So now the negative sides are tied together, and that's going to be grounded. And of course we're going to solder these where it's twisted here. See, approximately right there is where we're going to need it to be bent. And I'm actually going to solder this ground lead in first before we put the sleeve on. And then right where those capacitors are braided together, I'm just going to get them with a little bit of solder there. Just to make sure. And honestly, when they're twisted together like that, that connection should be perfectly fine, but we're just going to be extra safe and get a nice electrical connection as well. Okay, so next we're going to slide our little cover back on. And these are going to sit loosely in there. That's alright. We're mostly just keeping that in there so that it looks original, you know. We want the amp to look as original as possible when we're done. So I'm going to go ahead and snip that right there. Let's get in here and snip this lead. Alright, and then you want to heat up the eyelet. Get your lead down in there. Keep it hot. And let's add some more solder. There you go. We have a nice shiny connection. I'm actually gonna make sure I hold this down in there while it's setting. Okay, so that's one down. We got to do 4 more. You got that? That's good. Let's get some solder on there. Okay, so we're gonna get that in there. You can usually see when your solder is nice and cooled down. You got a nice strong connection right there. And one way that I like to test that we have continuity on that is to test between different leads coming from that same node and see what our resistance is, and it should be 0. And that means that you have a nice strong connection there. Cool. And then what we'll do is we'll actually test to ground on these leads. 0. Nice. So it looks like we got nice connections on all those. I like to just give them a little pull on all of the components that were actually connected to that same eyelet, and just make sure that all of them are still nice and steady. Cool. So now we're on to the next one. There you go. Looks exactly as it did when it came out. So next we're going to do the same to this one right here. And here's our two 25 microfarads. I'm going to start again by twisting these together. You don't need to twist them together like this, but it just makes it a little bit neater. Makes your work look a little bit nicer. And you only end up having to solder 1 lead into that eyelet instead of 2. And you can see these Astrons, the ones that came originally in the amp, they have 2 leads coming in for each capacitor and only 1 ground lead coming out. So that's essentially what we're doing right here as well. We're just tying them together. Alright, so we need to pull this bad boy out. And we're going to start by doing this side. These are cathode bypass caps. So basically what they do is they tie to the cathode to ground. They help bias your preamp tubes, and you don't normally need to bias these when you switch out a preamp tube like you would with your power tubes, but it's essentially the same thing. And you really want to replace these if you're going to be driving the amp. If you're going to be playing it semi-frequently, this is just like those filter caps where you're going to want to be replacing these, or else you're going to blow out some tubes, possibly other components that would cost more to replace than just tubes and affect the originality of the amp. So I play this amp, you know, every day almost, at least every other day. So yes, it affects the originality of the amp, but it's just something that needs to be done. And you know, a lot of guys that like vintage Fender stuff, they're gonna have this done to their amp anyways, because they want to play it without harming it or potentially taking out any other major components that are gonna cost a lot more and affect the value of the amp. So you know, normally when your filter caps are replaced, these are some of the caps that get replaced with them. And that's kind of why I like to leave these original Astron covers on there, because it just helps the way the amp looks. You know, you open it up and it still looks completely original, rather than seeing a couple new sprigs in there. You still get to see these original Astron covers. It's just a cool little touch I like to do. I'm going to go ahead and snip my lead. We're going to get this side put in first, just like last time, and then we'll put our sleeve on. Let's see. Let me go ahead and get this joint heated up nice and hot. See, a lot of the times when you're working on these old Fender amps, there's multiple components on each eyelet, and you really want to make sure that you get a nice secure connection with the new and the old components that are soldered on that eyelet. And it's kind of tricky to get your new components lead down in the eyelet when there's like 4 other things in there. So right here you can see we have 3 resistors and a ground connection all on that eyelet, and we're trying to put in the new cap. And sometimes it's just a little tricky, so that's why after I always like to test each connection just to make sure that we have a nice solid connection there between everything. So now I'm going to get some solder on those braids again. There you go. So that should be nice and good to go. And then we're going to go ahead and put our sleeve back on there. I didn't do this on the last one, but I'm actually going to roll the edges over on this one just to make it look a little nicer. And I'll probably go back and do this to the other one as well. There you go. So now we have our Astron sleeve. We're going to slide that right back over these caps here. It's going to sit just like that. Okay, so next I'm going to go ahead and crimp my lead. I'm going to trim it. Might as well do this one while I'm at it. we're going to get those taken care of. And that one right there went in nice and easy. So we're just going to add our solder. I'm going to let the heat stay on it for a second. And you really want to try and keep that lead as steady as you can while you're letting that connection settle, letting it cool down. Okay, that one's looking good. I'm just testing my other connections over here while I'm letting that one cool down. So next we're going to get this other leg in there. There you go. Now that one's in there. I'm going to try and move it. And I'm going to go ahead and heat up our connection again. Make sure we got it in there as good as we can. Then we're going to add some more solder. Like I said before, make sure every component in there has got a nice solid connection. And I'm going to get this side again. It's looking like it could use a little bit more solder. Just a touch. Alright. Now I'm just giving a little tug on each one of those connections to make sure that it's nice and secure. Alright. And then last we're going to do this test again. Okay, that's looking nice. That's looking good. Perfect. Perfect. Nice. Man, these are all looking great. Cool. Alright, on to our last one. I'm actually going to move these wires back over here like how they were before. And we're going to pull this last capacitor out. This one should be fairly easy. It looks like there's only 3 leads on this. Looks like there's only 3 leads on that one. And then just like the others, we're going to clip this side out right here. Alright. You can see this one's a bit smaller because there's actually only one capacitor in this one instead of having the two. So this one's just a 2 microfarad at 25 volts. So I have a Sprague here that's 2 microfarad at 50 volts. So be a perfect replacement for it. Just gonna get this one out of the sleeve again. Like I said before, this isn't necessary to take the capacitor out of the original sleeves, but I'm just kind of like a vintage Fender guy. I'm a vintage Fender enthusiast, I guess, so I just like to keep it looking as original as possible, and this is one of the ways to do it. But some of my other Fender amps don't have this done to it, and you would never even know unless you opened it up and knew what you were looking for. So I'm just gonna see if I could push this one through. Might need to open it up a little bit more. This one's being kind of tricky. See if I could flare it out a little bit. Then I might need to push it out with this thing. There you go. So got that last capacitor out of there. And like the other one, I'm gonna roll these edges back in so it looks a little bit neater. And the other capacitor you could see is quite a bit smaller. Let me just open up this package here really quick and we'll see. So this was a 22 microfarad at 25 volt. Just to be sure, we have a 2 microfarad. And if you look at the size difference of these, this was from 62. This one's from now, 2019, so you can see the size has improved quite a bit. And I'm just going to go ahead and measure out a bit, do that, and right there. Alright, so we're back in the front and we got the amp put back together. We're going to go through both channels. We'll do a demo with a Telly, and then we'll switch over to a Les Paul and get some humbuckers running through it. Right now we're going through the normal channel. I got my volume on about 3.5 right now, so it's going to be just a nice fat clean tone. So we're going to switch over to the vibrato side. And these amps, just like a lot of the other bigger brown face amps, has the harmonic tremolo, which is about as close to real vibrato that Fender got. It uses 6 preamp tubes. And 3 of them are dedicated to just the tremolo itself. So I'm going to show you that. So when you have the speed down pretty low, it kind of sounds almost like a univibe. So it's a little different than like the tremolo that you find in like a blackface amp. But alright, so we're going to switch over to a Les Paul and show what it sounds like with some humbuckers. So thanks for checking it out, and check out some of the other videos down here at ZIMM'S Guitars.